New York Democratic Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney is working tirelessly to reduce the number of law-abiding, tax-paying, honest Americans legally owning firearms by mandating that they obtain expensive insurance. Last month, she crowed that proposed measures would be the first bill to require liability insurance of gun owners nationwide. Remember the number, H.R. 1369, the Firearm Risk Protection Act. It mandates that all gun owners obtain liability insurance prior to even buying a firearm. Her bill states thusly, quote, "It shall be unlawful for a person who owns a firearm purchased on or after the effective date of the subsection not to be covered by a qualified liability insurance policy." This constitutional draconian legislation calls for your federal government to impose a fine of $10,000 on law-abiding, tax-paying firearms owners and voters who do not have insurance after the bill becomes law. The law, by virtue of its demands and constraints, would in effect reduce the number of legal firearm owners in your country and would thereby create a new class of criminals. Because of this legislation, many Americans would either elect not to follow the law or would be unable to afford the required insurance and would thus be forced to forfeit their firearms under fear of criminal prosecution by your federal government. Now dig this. She says proudly, quote, "For too long, gun victims and society at large have borne the brunt of the costs of gun violence. My bill would change that by shifting some of that cost back onto those who own the weapons." Did you hear that? In other words, according to Maloney and her co-sponsors, legally law-abiding, tax-paying gun owners and voters are thus responsible and culpable for violence committed by others. Anti-Second Amendment zealots are now adopting this irrational argument as they move to strip law-abiding, tax-paying gun owners and voting Americans of their firearms as a part of the post-Newtown frenzy and bandwagon. Chris Cox, the executive director of the NRA's Institute for Legislative Action, has stated that contemplated legislation is, quote, "ridiculous on its face as it presumes law-abiding gun owners are guilty for merely exercising a fundamental constitutional right. Simply put, this interferes with a right that you have as enumerated under your Second Amendment." Can you imagine First Amendment liability insurance that would be mandatory before you spoke or expressed yourself? No, that would be absurd. That would limit speech by affecting those unable to afford the coverage. And that, Sparky, is called preemption. In case you haven't noticed, there's a war on for your constitutional rights. Imagine that. Coming as you see fit.